Bismillah, alhamdulillah, wa salatu wa salam ala rasulillahi. Wanted to take a few minutes to address a point, alleviate some frustration at the same time. There's been a number of sisters that have reached out, and the professional sisters from different ethnic communities, and they're like extremely pissed off at the way that they get treated in the Muslim community. And if I were to take what they're saying at face value, which the problem is that the scenario is so prevalent, it's something that repeats itself on a regular basis, that even if an individual sister is exaggerating on the points are the same points that other sisters are going through. I don't know what we expect when we start talking about I'll put it to you this way. You can't have a sister that's a professional in a hospital or in a school, or she's involved in politics, or she has her own business, or she's a solid mother and she runs her household. I don't know what we expect. I don't know what we expect from sisters when they accomplish things in their lives. I don't know what we expect of them within our communities. Like, some of our cultural circles are not operating on Islamic principles, are not operating on principles of justice. And the dichotomy shows. So when you have a sister accomplished in society and she's like third rail in the Muslim community, there's a problem there. There's a problem there. Where she could be in the society in a decision-making position, or she can be respected in her home by her family and her husband, professional or stay-at-home moms, whatever, but she can be in positions where she gets some standing and respect. But then when she comes into the religious circle, which has nothing to do with the religion of Islam, it has to do with people's cultural orientations, she finds no sense of recognition, respect, regard, this, that. And yesterday, I got off the phone with the sister in the community, well connected, so on and so forth. And she just railed on and on about the treatment that she receives. People, I don't know what we are expecting, but I think that with all of these issues as they are, I think we're just headed for a compound, crisis situation that is going to be beyond our control. My suggestion is that we have to rethink, and this is not to go against Islam in any way, but we have to rethink our positions, and we have to look at what it is that Islam is saying and what it is that people have accomplished, right? And who they are as human beings, and we need to recreate our systems. We need to recreate our systems. Yeah, that's another thing. Rubina's bringing that up. We have these ideas. I had this conversation with a few. We have ideas about intimacy that they're not Islamic. They're not Islamic ideas of intimacy, because they look at women almost as being dirty. And that's not Islam. Islam doesn't have that kind of concept. That's people's cultural understandings or people's made-up religious practices. The issues of the way that sisters that are divorced, sisters that are widowed, in some communities, how that's handled is problematic. The pressure that's put on young sisters to immediately get married, or else you're not a marriageable candidate, that's extremely problematic, because what it does is it's forcing people into relationships that they're not ready for. And I'm not necessarily saying arranged marriages. I'm just saying that social pressure that's there. But those are other issues. Those are separate issues. I'm talking about specifically the space of women and how they function in our communities. And it's tied to those other issues. And basically, if we were to bring them all together, we just have a really bad understanding of how women, the role of women. It's not Islam. It has nothing to do with Islam, to be honest with you. It has to do with the psychology, and I laugh because of insanity. Because the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that's something that he railed against. He railed against the bad treatment of women. He railed against the oppression of women. That's one of the things that he worked hard against. And we have retreated from that whole orientation, and we're on something else. And so when sisters, when they start sounding extra liberal and they just go crazy on the community, that's why I said sisters are organizing. I'm stepping out of the way, because if we can't address these issues from an Islamic side, you understand what I'm saying? We can't address these issues from a human side of how we deal with human beings in the right way. Then we don't deserve to be in those positions. They have to be reformed. And when I hear people saying they're ready to clean house, I'm not getting involved in that. I have different fights. But if somebody feels as they're oppressed, I'm not going to step in the way of that unless we want to reform ourselves properly. But what we're doing is we're causing people to have issues psychologically. We're causing people to have issues with themselves. What we're doing is we're destroying people's quality lives, the quality of their lives. What we're doing is we're giving a bad name to religion itself. And what we're doing is we're creating a suffocating environment for our youth and for our children, in which they don't want to really be associated with us and with ourselves. And this is the damaging side to all of this. Yeah, this is the damaging side. So, I end on that note. It's really sad, that this is where things are at. But the hope and the motivation is that it's not where the deen is at. It's not where the prophet was at. Despite some of the misinterpretations and misquotations and all of that. And you know what? It's not where people are at. People see through this stuff. But if you're going to organize people, don't organize predicated upon being solely anti this or anti that. That has its place. But organize on these issues predicated upon what is right and what is good. Because if you make these people that don't know how to treat other human beings properly the focus in the center only, then what happens is that you get caught up in that dynamic. And whereas what the type of dynamic that we need is one of growth. That's my suggestion. Focus on the possibility of what can come about when we create new realities, when we create new relationships, just relationships with each other. Don't focus necessarily, because you're dealing with people that also are broken. And it's not an excuse for them at all. It's just that, what do you want from them? We're asking people for justice in certain situations, which they don't. فقد الشيء لا يعطيه is the principle, is the legal maxim, that the person that doesn't have, that which you ask them for, they can't give it. They don't have it. They're bankrupted. They're impoverished. They're deficient. They have a deficit. And so we're asking people for justice, and we're asking people for better situations, and they don't really know how. They don't know how to. And so we have to recreate our relationships with each other. We have to begin to move beyond. We have to talk about what is healthy. We have to talk about what is an empowering approach versus just being focused on, how we're being oppressed. And I'm all for designating that, but I think that has been done. That has been done, but quite often. But what is not being done is talking about what do healthy relationships look like. What does a healthy environment look like? That's not being done. A lot of people are talking about, the oppression of women, this, that, but what does it look like for women to be empowered, in specific in the Muslim community? What does it look like to have healthy relationships? What does it look like to be supportive of single moms? What does it look like? What are the values necessary to not look at divorced women as a problem? What does it look like to be able to power share with sisters? We're not talking about what does that look like in a healthy way. We're just talking about how those things don't exist. And that in itself, it was a good start, but it's not going to take us to where we need to go, because it's keeping those tendencies which are oppressive at the center. And that's not what needs to be at the center. What needs to be at the center is a new set of relationships that are healthy. A new set of relationships that are healthy. And if women would allow me to speak in this situation, one of the things that the feminist movement doesn't have in place is, what are relationships between males and females? What do they look like? I've asked that. I used to sit in, feminist reading groups. I asked that of professors, my teachers. They don't have a response to that, because it's a liberation only of the individual. And Islam didn't only come to liberate individuals. It came to liberate individuals in groups. And it came to reset relationships of people to one another. Well, I mean, to be honest with you, and this is what I say, every form of feminism is not a problem. You know what I'm saying? Or everything in feminism is not a problem, and everything is not okay. Everything in Islamic culture is not a problem, and everything in Islamic culture, is not necessarily okay. Like, we have to look at what the religion says, and we have to see how to reform those things. But yeah, I mean, I think that Kamala or Ilhan Omar and all these people, they have become models. And I'm not going to say that everything that they do is wrong. That's not the case. Why don't we... The problem that I find in the Muslim community is that you can have somebody like Ilhan Omar or Linda Sarsour, and people will rail against that. And this doesn't mean that I agree with everything. But they rail against that, but then when brothers do the same thing, they don't have anything to say about it. They're people. They have accomplishments. They have strengths. They have accomplishments. If somebody has strengths and accomplishments, let's weigh it on the scale. Is this positive strength and accomplishment? Do I find for me, in Ilhan Omar being a refugee, transforming her life, being an advocate, I find that to be amazing. You understand what I'm saying? The same thing, Linda Sarsour, she come from Palestinian family. They go into the whole, East Coast region. She comes back into America. So do we have to agree with everything that everybody does? No. You understand? We don't have to agree with what everybody does. That's why we have the Prophet and the companions, as Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, as a model, as a set of models for us. You understand what I'm saying? If we're expecting people to be, a complete models for us. We're scared that those women are going to disrupt the way that, we should understand womanhood. It's already destroyed, yo. It's like, I mean, I don't know what... Do we think that the woman who tolerates the verbal and physical abuse, that's the model? We don't have anything to say about that model. So if we're going to talk about this model and this exorcism, let's talk about that model and this exorcism. We don't want to have women and sisters that just tolerate any sort of abuse either. And so I think that the reality is we don't know what we want out of life. Both men and women, we don't have a healthy sense of ourselves in relationships. That's why I said before, I think 2021 has to be the year where we say we're at zero, and we just say we need to recreate. And it doesn't mean that we're literally at zero, but we should put ourselves in the imagination of we're at zero, and then imagine a world of possibilities in light of our commitments as Muslims, as in light of our values as Muslims. But it's okay to imagine a new world. Like I need us to imagine, what do healthy relationships look like? I need us to imagine, what does a healthy young Muslim man look like? What does a healthy young Muslim woman look like? Because what I'm seeing right now is I'm seeing a lot of sisters, they're very focused, they have a lot of ambition, but I don't know if it's healthy, or I don't know if it's just that they have ambitions for their career. I don't know if it's really healthy as a woman. And I'm seeing a lot of young brothers that they're collapsed. They may have an ambition for a particular career, but then when you look and you're like, yo, bro, it's like, are you ready to be a father? You know what I'm saying? You may be ready to pay bills, but are you ready to be a father? Are you ready to be a husband? I don't think so. I don't think so. There's a lot of, from what I'm seeing, there's too much immaturity. Our young brothers are not prepared. Our young brothers at 25 have no maturity. We have men that are also, they're emotionally immature. You know what I'm saying? They on multiple levels. And we have sisters that, they have we have sisters that they accomplish on certain things, and their power, focus, but on other things they're not, they don't have it together. So the issue is, we can go back and forth all day. This is a conversation that should not be one-sided. It's not only a conversation for men. It's also a conversation for women. It's also a conversation for youth. It's also a conversation for adults. But we lost somewhere. We lost in this game. But one of the things that I'm going to tell you is that if we have to choose over women losing their faith and continuing in some of these circles, you know what I'm saying, then it's better that they discontinue in these circles and that they do their own thing and keep their faith, even if it has mistakes or whatever, then they completely leave the deen. Because that's what is forcing people it's forcing some people, the way that they're being treated, is forcing them to reconsider their commitment to the faith. And the problem is that has nothing to do with the faith itself. It has to do with people. You understand what I'm saying? It has to do with the people that don't understand their faith. And that's why we need to really be focused on really studying Islam and how it applies in this society, in this environment, and not try to duplicate what's going on in Saudi Arabia, not try to duplicate what's going on in India, not try to duplicate what's going on in other places unless it's beneficial for us to duplicate those things in this type of environment that we live in. Because part of the deen is that we have to understand the custom. But at the same time, in the meantime, we need to have healthy support groups for people that are struggling. And healthy support groups, people, is not only that we come together and that we are complaining or critical about what's going on. That's only one part of it. Healthy support groups is that we begin to also flourish. We can create support groups that talk about men and how they're trash and how they do this and how they do that. And then at the same time, somewhere along the line, sisters want to get married. So, but where does that leave you at? Where does that take you? You understand what I'm saying? So it's better that we identify the problems. We have the support for growth that's necessary. And then we can begin to have a dialogue also with brothers. You understand what I'm saying? Of what is it that's needed to have healthy relationships? It's not only marital relationships. It's also just interacting with each other. What's a healthy brother-sibling relationship look like? You know what I'm saying? Does a sibling relationship, a healthy one, is that one sibling does all the work, the sister does all the work, and the brother just gets to do whatever the heck he wants, and that's it? What are healthy work relationships like? I had a sister break down on me about a month and a half about how she was being treated on her job by Muslim brothers. You understand what I'm saying? And how she felt oppressed. Yesterday was a situation of a Muslim professional sister pissed off about how masjid administrations deal with her. You understand what I'm saying? So there's a continuous conversation that I have going on with sisters that are divorced, and in their communities they're condemned to like death because of that. That has nothing to do with Islam, people. And what we're doing is we're giving a bad understanding to Islam because of how we're understanding these things. But I want to get away from that for a moment, and I want to say that we need healthy support groups for people that are struggling in these situations. And we need, what I mean by healthy support groups is how to transcend and grow beyond these problems. How to grow emotionally beyond these problems, how to grow. It's important. Just coming together to be angry or coming together to criticize the Muslim community is not going to get us the Muslim community that we want. I'm all for critical analysis and all that, but we have to begin to create that community. And we could do it right now in our interactions, in the way that we deal with each other, and the types of support that we give each other. And then from there, we can move on to create models and organizations, which the people now, they have an understanding of how we should treat each other. Right? But if we just blasting on each other only, when male-female dynamics are hard, they're hard to, the general society right now, that's where some groups are at. It's just a complete antagonism between males and females. We don't want them in the Muslim community. And yesterday I was asking one of the Shaikh, he's a convert brother who's a Shaikh, and I asked him, I said, do you think that there's more bickering that goes on in the Muslim community than in the non-Muslim community? He says that it's fairly high in the Muslim community. That the non-Muslims, they have it, but it's fairly higher in the Muslim community. That's because a lot of us are frustrated people. You understand what I'm saying? And I wish that, sisters, we can come together and have a solid dialogue of what is it that needs to change. That's the request. You know what I'm saying? That we have a solid dialogue on what needs to change in relationships, in support, in our interactions with each other. You know what I'm saying? What is it that needs to change? But without necessarily going into this, everything is patriarchal and this and that. You know what I'm saying? We need to have an honest discussion on what's healthy. You know what I'm saying? Because remember that there's also boys involved in this. Some of you are mothers. We don't want to turn. We don't want to reproduce the same sex gender battle that's going on in society within our community. You know what I'm saying? We want to heal from that sickness, and we want to be able to flourish and grow. We also, and I'm gonna say something, some people may say it's not appropriate, but we also don't want to turn our boys into girls. There has to be a space for our boys and our young men and our men to be boys, young men, and men. What does that look like? To be honest with you, in the society, is not really clear. You know what I'm saying? And it's not 100% bad that we're discussing these things, because what's happening now is this society is readjusting itself. And this is a continual process of a pursuit to a certain extent of justice in the society. But in Islam, some of these problems we have because they're in the culture, not necessarily in the religion. And because they're in the cultures need to change to a certain extent. But if we think that we're going to come in and just transform these cultures radically, you know what I'm saying? I think that we're mistaken on that. That's just, it's just going to be, we're just going to create a mess. That's why I said we need to envision new relationships versus saying that we can begin those new relationships by just fighting. No, model for people. We have a whole new generation that's coming. We can have these conversations with the new generation. You understand what I'm saying? We can have these conversations with each other. Those of us that are willing to have these conversations and willing to deal with these issues, we can have these conversations. But I'm also tired of people that don't know how to engage the elders. You got to realize the elders, they're in their ways. Some of them will change and some of them will not. You understand what I'm saying? So our fight is not 100% with the elders. Our fight is with ourselves. Because the reality is that, what are we trying to say? That because they built these establishments, now we have to come in and take them over and do their own thing. But we also have to show that we can build. We also have to be able to build new establishments, new arrangements, and also work with them to a certain extent if we don't want to have, a pretty much a civil war internally in our own communities. We already have that going on with other issues. We have Aqidah issues going on. We have Madhab issues going on. We have cultural issues going on. We have generational issues going on. If you add on the gender sex battle into that, I don't think we're going to survive this joint. You know what I'm saying? I don't think that we're going to survive that internally in our community. And I think that there's enough of us that we want to dialogue properly in a healthy way on how to move forward and build in a healthy way. That's what we should be doing. Our conversations should change. But look at what happens with this generation. Look at what happens with the younger generation. Look at what happens with the online generation. You know what I'm saying? Look at what's happening with the younger baby boomers, you know, and the generation that comes after that, and look at how they're functioning. You know what I'm saying? Compared to like a Generation Z or something like that. Look at how the interactions are. People are fighting with each other, and so at the end of the day, I think that we should set out a series of discussions on what does it mean to be, what does it mean to support sisters? What does it mean to come into a healthy womanhood? What does it mean to come into a healthy manhood? But specifically in this case, what does it mean to be, healthy Muslim sister in a marriage, in the Muslim community, in roles of power, in roles of influence in education? We don't have it. Nobody's talking about that. We're not talking about that. What does that look like? And that dialogue has to come in a lot of ways from sisters, and it has to come from brothers to some extent, but it has to come from sisters. What does that look like? You know what I'm saying? And if sisters don't have those dialogues, those are, if the sphere is, well, we don't have Islamic knowledge, we can discuss those issues. You know what I'm saying? We can discuss the issues of Islamic knowledge, but some of this stuff has nothing to do with Islam. Some of it is just that it's about suppression of people. It has nothing to do with Islamic values and this and that. It has, that Islamic values need to be called. It's more of the Islamic values are not being practiced, and there's suppression of people, and there's negation of people. There's a lack of recognition of people, right? And so we have to open up that dialogue. What does it look like for women to be in the spaces in a healthy way? What does it look like for women to be in a healthy relationship? I think that if we can get that dialogue running without it being all oppositional, then we can have brothers that they can listen. Because once it's oppositional, people don't, people, I hate to say it like this, but sisters, if you want change in part, you also have to have allies. And if you alienate your allies, it's fine if that's the route that you want to go. But I'm talking about allies from brothers. If you alienate your allies because you're just against the man only, you know what I'm saying? And it's the man that's the problem. And if we get the man out of the way, you know what I'm saying? Then, what space is there for allies from brothers? That's what you got to realize. If you want us to be like you, or like you want, if it's that you want to flip the thing over so that it's like we are in your image, you know what I'm saying? That type of thing, you know what I'm saying? Then what space is it for us? And I don't mean to pull the equality card, but I'm saying if you want allies, some of us are listening, and some of you have reached out and you've brought these issues. But I'll be honest with you, on occasion, some of you are not fair. Because if I'm sitting here and listening to you for hours on your situation, on your plight, and then you can't see that there's empathy, compassion, I'm not disrupting you, I'm not trying to correct you, but you're saying that as soon as I bring up the man piece to say that men need reconstruction, men have some issues too. As soon as I bring that up, if you feel as though that's an undermining of allyship, that's a problem, because Islamically liberation is for all of us. See what I'm saying? Islamically liberation is for all of us. The Prophet ﷺ, he came to liberate Bilal, he came to liberate Umar, he came to liberate Sumayya. See what I'm saying? He came to liberate the women, he came to liberate the men, he came to liberate the children, the old people. That's why the early Muslim community was a community of liberation across the board. Even he came to liberate those who had standing and power and money and those who were poor. That Islamic liberation in that sense is a little different than, for instance, some of the liberation tendencies that we see in the society. Some of what we see in those tendencies, those groups, they have some good things, but they also have some issues that don't overlap with the concept of we believe in family as Muslims. So, that becomes the issue, whether we talk about, like, that's why some of these brothers, when they talk against feminism, and then they talk about, well, this is a liberal agenda. But my man, Islam says that women have a certain standing in the deen. And so, for instance, if you don't want to recognize their standing and their dignity, you are opening up the door because you sound like a conservative right-winger in that type of situation. And that's what's pushing some of the sisters to push back with, maybe some liberal ideas or sometimes leftist ideas, which is they're not always equivalent to each other. But part of it is because we don't understand the Islamic movement itself. The movement of liberation within Islam. Islam is about liberation on multiple fronts. It's not about liberation only on one front. Right? And so we also have new situations. Like we have, to be honest with you, the role issue between male and female, that's a big issue in marriages. How to navigate that. How you navigate roles in marriages. When you have people that are educated, when you have people that are contributing to the pot, how do you navigate that? We're not clear on that. And what we want to do is we want to bring into the dynamic sometimes is a traditional concept of marriage, which is not necessarily to say that it is the only way that Islam recognizes marriage. Traditional concept of marriage, meaning man is in charge, woman follows suit, there's children, man is the head. But when you look at the prophetic example, you understand what I'm saying? And there's cases in which the economics were not even aligned. Like in the case of Khadija. You understand what I'm saying? When you look at the fact that the Prophet, he had a different marital system. You understand what I'm saying? And he entertained, his wives, and he dealt with them in a different way. And he helped in the household. So there's role fluidity, there's decision making, but there's also still honoring the role of the man. So we have to be careful that we don't only say that marriage in Islam is only X way. Because in Islam, it allows for different marital organizations to exist. It's going to come down to what it is that the couple is agreeing on and deciding on. If we limited ourselves to a certain time period in Islam in the fiqh books, when the society is stable, when there's no such a thing as unemployment, when there's no such thing really as inflation, when people own land, when we're not living in those realities, people. We have mortgages, we have property tax, we have inflation, we have job loss, we have career pursuit. And we live in a capitalist society which demands a certain amount of money. And we have to realize that when income is only one directional, when there's only one person, that in reality, in many ways, it puts the family in jeopardy. If there's only one person bringing in the income, and that person, and you have a traditional style family, what happens if that brother dies? Or what happens to that sister if they get divorced? You understand what I'm saying? We have to think through Islamic values and really understand what's going on in our time period. And once we do that, I think that a lot of the issues that we have in male-female dynamics, they can resolve themselves a little more. But we do have to value the role of women. Not every culture is the same, yo. Every culture, every Muslim community is not the same. The situation in the African American community is not the situation in the Indian community. The situation in the Indo-Pac community is not going to be the same in every class, right? All of those things are there. You understand what I'm saying? Even that issue, Betsy, even when you say, but Akhi, what about kids getting lost due to both parents working a lot? Even that is not the same in every community. You got to realize some communities, they still have the grandparents around. Some of our communities have grandparents. They have in-laws. They have siblings. You know what I'm saying? That carry that weight. They have neighbors and so on and so on. Not every community is in the same social economic situation. Not every community is in the same familial organizational dynamics, where it's just some families are just husband, wife, and children. Other families is husband, wife, and the children and the grandparents are living in the home. So this is why this becomes complicated. Some communities like for instance, in the African American community, a woman being divorced is not an issue. But for instance, when you go to the Arab community, or when you go to certain segments of the Indo-Pac community, it's a big problem. You know what I'm saying? When you look at some communities, a woman being older is not an issue. You know what I'm saying? For her to get remarried. You go to other communities, it's a death sentence. In some communities, women being assertive is not. In other communities, it is. We just don't understand ourselves well enough to be able to have these dialogues. You know what I'm saying? And that's why we have to be careful. The problems right now that are going on in the upper class, middle class, economically speaking, community is not necessarily like I know I know Ward Deen masjids where sisters sit on the board, they have decision making, they have power, they have this, that, and there's no conflict between male and female brothers and sisters on the issue. And then I know communities that are in the suburbs somewhere. You know what I'm saying? And there's male, females on the board, and there's just a tussle between male, females. Really bad, really bad tussles between male and females. It's really nasty. And there's others where there is no women on the board, period. You know what I'm saying? And women don't even have a space in the masjid. Every community is not the same, people. And that the danger of that's why we need to have a series of discussions which are very carefully organized and planned out to deal with these things without pressure. And if it takes us a year to dialogue them, it takes a year to dialogue. You know, if it takes 100 hours, 100 hours. You know, but we take and we deal with these conversations and these issues, wanting to safeguard ourselves and our community. The way that I'm seeing some of these conversations take place is scary. It leads me to think that we as a community will not survive because there's so much anger. You understand what I'm saying? There's so much anger that's there that's not going to go anywhere. You know what I'm saying? It's not going to go anywhere. This is just one issue. You understand what I'm saying? There's other issues that take place. Like this, the male-female dynamic, it cuts across the whole community. That's, you know, in the summertime and recently, the whole issue of racism came up in the Muslim community. That hasn't been dealt with properly. You understand what I'm saying? And so what I'm saying to you is we have too many issues running that are not dealt with properly. And so if we want to really deal with the male-female dynamic, we have to have solid discussions with each other. Women have to have their own space to be able to articulate. You know what I'm saying? We have to have shared spaces to be able to understand each other. We should agree that liberation is for all of us. You know what I'm saying? It's not just for one particular group. You know what I'm saying? Liberation is a group process in Islam. It's not only individual, and it's not only an individual group, but it's all of us. Because Jahiliyyah manifests itself in different ways. Jahiliyyah manifests itself in the way of ethnocentricity. It manifests itself in the way of sexism, classism. You know, it manifests itself in the way of beliefs that are problematic, beliefs that are shirky. You know, Jahiliyyah manifests itself in oppression. That's the age of ignorance. You know, when we start talking about liberating ourselves from that dynamic, if we look at the early Muslim community, you know, there were a number of different things that they were looking at that were problematic. And the liberation didn't only come, the prophetic liberation didn't only come of liberating women from the oppression of men in that society. Liberation came addressing the situation of women, addressing the plight of people that are oppressed in general, maybe economically, you know what I'm saying? And then, you know, the issue of women came into that, the issue of how people that were enslaved came into that, the issue of culture came into that, and then also self-oppression. Oppression was looked at from a number of different levels. Self-oppression came in at, you know, people, what Islam considers self-oppression, following your desire, you know, being locked into alcohol, this, that. Also the issue of worshiping false gods. So we have to understand Islamic liberation, and then we can properly dialogue with these groups. You know what I'm saying? These groups that are out here, not everything that they say are wrong, and not everything that they say is right. You know what I'm saying? And we have to be able to see that we can't expect them to imitate everything that we're doing, right? But what we're doing now is we're confused about Islam. We're confused about the groups. We're taking from here, we're taking from there, and we're just fighting one another. You know, we're just fighting one another. And so we're never going to be able to move forward, especially on the male-female dynamics, if we're not willing to listen to the plight of sisters. That's the takeaway point. I'm leaving with that. It's just gonna get worse. It's gonna get worse. You know, now that there's a female vice president, that's gonna change the dynamics for a lot of people. That's why I said I'm stepping out of the way. Y'all can fight all day long. That's just gonna embolden people even more. And if you have backward policies, or if you have backward attitudes towards women, you know, I'm staying out of the way. You know, shots fired, and that's what it's gonna be. You know, that's what it's gonna be. We can't continue these types of cycles. The society is on something else now. You know, the society is playing on different, you know, levels. Like I said, you can't expect a woman that's a doctor, a woman that is a businesswoman, a woman that knows how to manage children and she knows how to maintain a household and this and that, to be, you know what I'm saying, in a situation where she's not, you know, respected and regarded. You know, so I'm out. You know, I'm staying out of the way. You've been warned, people. You know, I told you 2021 is going to bring some very interesting dynamics, but the dialogues need to take place. Women, you need to have solid dialogues. You know what I'm saying? You need to have solid dialogues, and you need to explore, you know, where Islam is, where you at, what you need, you know, and outside of the context of somebody hurt you, a man hurt you, you need to come into your own, you know, and need to understand that if you want to be in a relationship, in a marital relationship, you coming into your own also has to come into needs to come into the equation, and that is, where does a spouse fit into that? What does you coming into your own mean? You know, having a spouse. See what I'm saying? Like, what does you coming into your own mean? And you have young boys. You know, that's important. You know, there's a lot to be said on that. But if I talk too much, some sisters will be like, why are you talking for us? That's why I said, you know, there's some things that need to happen in order for us to be able to move forward. Assalamu alaikum.